Hey guys, welcome to Driveway Liberty Podcast. First thing I want to do is welcome you, the enlightened, the few, the most intelligent among us. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us tonight. And be sure to share the broadcast with your friends and family. We're going to get deep in some weeds tonight. Before we do, let me introduce you to my good friend, Dan Matachachachacho. What's up, Dan?
Hey Wes, how you doing?
Man, I'm not feeling good at all, brother.
I heard through the grapevine that you're having a rough day today. Sorry.
Yeah, man, a little under the weather, a little drama that I'm not going to get into. And I don't feel well. I hadn't felt good since probably Saturday. I've been up and down a little bit on it, but you know what? I'm here. I'm ready to talk for a little bit, share some things.
Well, I'm excited, and
You're
it's
excited? Yeah, I bet you are, man. That Miami's in the championship game.
championship,
It's been
baby.
since what, third grade? Since the last time they were in?
No, not that long. Not that long. I was I
What,
was an
Jimmy
old
Johnson?
fart. I was
Jimmy
an
Johnson.
old fart. No, it was Larry Coker was the last one that won a championship. It was Butch Davis's players, but Larry Coker.
Was that when Bobby Abear was playing and all them guys?
Bobby Abear. Is he a hockey player?
There was a Abear that played for Miami back in the day. He backed up. I don't remember who, but he played. I do remember that. I do remember that. So, man, you've been watching the news a little bit. You know about the Supreme Court case that's going on.
Little bit. So it's funny because the some some of the things that go before the Supreme Court definitely need to, and it's a good thing it's there to kind of settle some things. But this one they're talking about now with the whole transgender in women's sports is to me it's just insanity.
Yeah.
But just to tell you what give you some backstory of what's going on. In March of 2020, the Idaho legislature passed a bill that said you had to be a biological female. No biological males could participate in female sports in the state of Idaho. So that changed their governing body for their sports.
Right.
And it also impacted the NCAA because at the time that this bill was passed, the NCAA allowed it, and so did the state of Idaho.
Right.
So once this bill passed, obviously the state sports stopped, and then eventually at some point when maybe it was a combination of laws being passed in multiple states and public pressure, the NCAA kind of reverted to you gotta be biological to do it. So right. This suit, it's kind of 2 in 1. So you got 2 different suits being heard at the same time. So you got the one suit's filed by Lindsay Heacock. Maybe I'm not pronouncing that right, but it's pretty ironic that's the last name. But it's a transgender woman, so basically a biological male,
right.
Student at Boise State.
What was that last name again?
Heacock. Hecox. Hecox.
Okay, Hecox. Yeah.
Hecox.
All right, go ahead. I'm listening. I'm not making any judgments.
So it's a dude pretending to be a woman at Boise State.
Okay, gotcha.
And this dude's undergoing hormone therapy and wants to do women's track at Boise State. So this person's suing the state, and it's been kicked up to the Supreme Court. There's also a cisgender, which I'm trying to keep up with these terms. If you're a cisgender female, that means you're a girl.
I think so.
You're a female.
I think that's
cisgender means normal, right?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think
so. There's
maybe some of the folks watching can chime in and let us
chime in because basically,
comments, by the way,
a high school female has joined this as a Jane Doe. And her fear is she'll be subjected to the law's sex verification procedures. So I guess, I don't know what the details of the law. Do they have to look for the JJ to prove, or does your birth certificate, sex on your birth certificate?
I would imagine that in some of the more liberal states, you could actually have your birth certificate legally changed.
Well, okay, so
maybe it is a little examination of the parts and the pieces.
So there's a projected fear, not an actual fear that this person has undergone this issue, but that they're worried that somebody's going to say, "Show me your JJ."
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
and
then the other one is West Virginia versus BPJ.
BPJ?
BPJ.
I thought you said PPJ.
No, it's B okay. Is in Becky, B is in Pepper, and J is in Jackson. That's the initials of the person who brought forth this thing. So basically, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in West Virginia, law barring transgender girls and women from participating in sports and women's team, is determined it was unconstitutional. So now you have...
Well, it's a question of constitutional law. That's why it's been pushed up to the Supreme Court.
So you have the law being put into place, and then you have a lower court of appeals basically saying it's unconstitutional. So now it's being kicked up to the Supreme Court to settle the argument.
Now, if you're just joining us, this isn't all we're talking about tonight. We're going to get into something. This conversation earlier today actually spawned us to come up with something that we think you're going to find very interesting, and it might actually get us disappeared because it's a revelation. So be sure to stick around and hang out with us and participate in the conversation. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
That's all right. BPJ is a 12-year-old who's challenging the 14th Amendment, Equal Protections Clause, and Title IX sex discrimination. So, you got, obviously, a 14 or a 12-year-old is not, I would think, is not advanced enough to
even be questioning their own.
For anything, for any of this.
Yeah, what 12-year-old's going to really be participating in this? Yes.
Yeah. So adults are driving it, which is another sad chapter.
You've got to respect the legal hustle on that, though. I mean, you like, I don't want to have to prove I am what I am, and the only way to do that is to drop trowel and show you what I have or don't have. And
listen, for our entire lives, the guys, when they got their physical, it's, drop your drawers, turn your head and cough.
Yeah.
That's literally how we were checked for a hernia. And it's pretty clear what plumbing we have down there at that time. Yeah. I don't know how physicals are done with females. A lot of times now the physicals are done by their actual pediatricians, depending on their age.
Well, when I was in high school, we had to go to our own doctor. We did like a cardio thing where they checked for heart murmurs.
See, I'm old. When I was in school, we lined up just like you've seen in the raunchy comedies. We lined up, drop your pants, turn your head and cough.
Well, that's a better thing, I guess. So real quick. So one of the things that happened in front of the Supreme Court was this right here. All right, the ACLU, who is helping fund this suit, by the way, and they can't even define a man or a woman in the Supreme Court. Alito says, what does it mean to be a man or a woman? ACLU says, we do not have a definition for that for the court. Alito's like, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means? So just based on that alone, that's not looking real good. So let's talk a little bit about the conversation we were having today when we first started talking about this. We were talking about this and the misdirections in Minnesota and all of these different stories that come out that just So it's like 1-2 punches constantly. This, that, just distracting us and keeping us. And you brought up a question that got me to thinking today. It's like, what's the end game? What are they trying to accomplish with all of this? And my response was what? Do you remember? Control and enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to ask a question of the viewers right now, all three of you that's currently on.
There's a lot of people that will listen to us and watch us after.
Sure, absolutely. And if you're listening to this after it's live, please answer, and we'll do our best to monitor it and respond after the fact. But what major rule has been added to our society in the last 10 years that has been fully removed? Take your time. If you think you have an answer, we'll give you, a little. I don't have any Jeopardy music in the background. Plus, it's copywritten, and we don't want to get copyrighted by YouTube or Facebook. What you're feeling right now, that's what I've titled managed drift. That feeling of you can't remember the last time a rule has been imposed on us by society, whether it be societal or legal, that has been fully removed after it's been imposed.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is stuff with COVID, but they were never actual defined rules. It was a societal norm in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some places, those norms are still in operation.
Absolutely.
Up north and out in California, they're still wearing masks. There are people down here visiting right now. I saw one in the grocery store yesterday with a mask on. So those rules, they haven't been formally removed. There are those of us, like in the entire state of Florida, it's predominantly rebellious against rules like that. But those rules haven't been formally removed. So the point of this is control doesn't arrive as force necessarily. It arrives as help. We didn't choose the system. We are adapting to it. So where am I going with this? Let's talk about what I'm calling the Managed Drift Doctrine. A society can be guided toward passive compliance, not through force or ideology, but by allowing administrative systems to quietly expand authority while culturally destabilizing shared norms, increasing dependence on institutions, and making centralized control feel necessary. Sorry, my dog's asleep and she's having a dream. Feel necessary rather than imposed. Think about that for a minute. We've been guided towards passive compliance. Now, we've touched on this stuff in several of our podcasts in the past. We say that bureaucrats have the most control, and they are the nameless and faceless parts of our government and society that we have no direct control over. So some of it may be ideologically driven, but it's not necessarily ideologically focused. We have become increasingly dependent on our institutions. A prime example, Congress, the Republican majority held Congress, was holding strong back in October on the healthcare subsidies. Well, just last week they caved and they voted to continue those.
3 more years.
3 more years.
What happens in 3 years?
Another argument, another fight. It could be somebody else in control.
Another president.
Another president. So the idea here in this managed drift doctrine is we are drifting further and further away from true liberty into just being pawns and controlled by these faceless bureaucrats. So let's dive in a little bit. You have anything you want to add here, Dan?
No, I mean, it's you don't get to control people, or you don't control people by cracking down on them. People rebel when you do that. Yeah.
Well, you've heard the frog in the boiling water example, where you put them in there, and if you turn it up slowly, the frog will just sit there and die.
Yes.
But if you
Yes.
throw him in, he's jumping right out if the water's already
What
boiled.
what you need to do, and what this is illustrating, we'll illustrate more deeper as we go, is you control people by confusing them, weakening things that used to help people stand on their own, and then slowly train them to depend on the systems, so that eventually people accept control as a necessity as opposed to being ordered to obey.
Well,
That's why this
a
is
prime
so
example, and this goes back to my earlier question of what have you know of something that's been instituted that's been fully repealed?
yeah.
Welfare and Social Security both were supposed to be temporary systems.
There's very
Now,
few instances in which we've undone any of those things.
and if
And
you
the ones
even
that we did
remotely
undo, we
say,
put
I
them back
think
in place.
one of the Bushes, I can't remember which, said, you know what, we ought to privatize Social Security. And in all reality, if you took that percentage out of your paycheck every week and you actually put it in a private market, you would have a lot more money to retire on, and you would have access to all of your money.
Well, you have the money, because now the money's not there.
Right.
The government has used it in other areas.
But if you bring that up in a campaign platform or even in Congress, man, they're going to tar and feather your ass.
Yeah, because
ride you out on a rail.
Just to what I said, people are now dependent on the system.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So if we dive into this next principle, confusion beats control every time. Think about what we see in the media right now. Think about everything that's going on, that 1-2 punch that I mentioned a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
You don't need an evil layer or matching robes or some hidden organization like the Masons or the Illuminati. You just need people unsure of what's real, what's true, even what words mean anymore. If language is unstable, which, think about the things that are defined, male versus female, this versus that. What are some other examples of that where we have changed the meanings of words? Definitions are shifting constantly.
Yeah, recessions. We've changed the term recession, what that means, based on who's running the current administration.
What do we call welfare now? Entitlements.
Yeah, hate speech, misinformation. There's a whole bunch of things that these definitions have changed and evolved to create confusion.
And you can't anchor a moral position, as it states right here plainly in blue and white. You can't anchor a moral position if definitions are constantly shifting. If truth feels negotiable, authority fills the vacuum.
Well, to your point, what we were just talking about with the Supreme Court with these suits, just in Title IX alone. So the definition of what Title IX was set up for has completely changed. And now you have Supreme Court justices. And how can we determine who's being violated or equal protections under the law if we can't determine where they're at under the law, what defines them under the law?
Right.
So
you can't. If you don't have a standard definition of something, you can't define it. You can't take a stance on it.
And this is the world we live in, where instead of people arguing policies, positions, and an actual how facts impact us, they're literally arguing definitions.
Exactly. What is the meaning of? Guess who they look to? What the meaning of the word is.
And guess who they look to clarify?
The powers that be.
The authority. Whatever that be, whether it's the empowered, whether it's the I'd rather listen to a doctor about COVID than some podcaster. Well, who was right? The podcaster.
Yeah.
The doctor was lying.
It was a podcaster with the outlier doctor that was ostracized and canceled.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was, yeah. So a confused population doesn't revolt. It argues with itself on social media while power quietly consolidates. Let's move on to the next slide here. Media isn't flat out lying. Now, I know that's contrary to everything we've always said on here. It's not flat out lying, it's purposely steering the conversation. So it is amplifying extremes until they look mainstream. They ignore nuance because nuance doesn't spread. They frame dissent as either stupidity or malice. That's where the lies actually are. So it's a more effective tactic than just straight up falsehood. Because if you can't define it and you can't point it out cleanly or prove it cleanly, when people can't do that, they just disengage. They disenfranchise. Sound familiar? That's the goal. A cynical citizen is easier to manage than an angry one.
So I was trying to think of an analogy to this, and what I came up with, and tell me if you like this. It's like someone holding a flashlight in a dark room. They're not inventing objects. They're just deciding which objects you're allowed to see and which ones stay in the shadows.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, like shadow puppets. It's not always what it appears to be.
Yes.
It's still just hands making puppets. You know?
Yep.
It's not a bad analogy, Dan. I'm proud of you on that. That's nice. We'll reach out to Hecox and see what she thinks.
Well, but as a consumer of news and information, you're trying to argue specific points, and sometimes you can, but it's really a nuance of it. So everybody knows when they see a news report that's one that does this, where it's manipulating the view of it, like this lady that just got shot by ICE.
Yeah.
They'll show you angles to make it to get rid of the argument on the other side. Like the wheels were turned. You could see her hand moving the steering wheel. It didn't hit her. He easily could have got out of the way. They don't show the angle in which she plowed into him. So
you know what? Time out real quick. Sorry. Along those lines, a news story just came out a little while ago that the cop that was hit, we were making fun of Trump last week for, over inflaming this thing. The guy actually was bleeding internally.
Yeah, I was mad at Trump for what he said. Apparently I didn't have all the information. My bad.
Apparently he had a little more inside skinny than we did. And this guy's been canceled. His life, he's been doxxed. I look, man, it's tragic. The girl lost her life. I'm not going to say that. But when a cop, and I'm a don't tread on you guy. Don't tread on me. But we have rules in this society. And as long as I live in this society, until I can get those rules changed, I have to either be willing to give up my life to fight for it, or I need to be able to make a point to comply. I mean, there's a level of compliance that we're expected to hold in a civilized society. So,
well, there's pundits out there that are making the argument and comparing the Ashley Babbitt situation to this woman being shot. And so in one instance, Ashley Babbitt, we don't know if Ashley Babbitt was
her business though.
Well, we don't know if Ashley Babbitt was a part of the rioters that beat up cops on their way in, or if she was a part of the people who walked through and were invited in a different entrance and walked through. She was sticking her head into a window. On the other side of that window was another barrier.
Right.
There was no Congress people there. She stuck her head out. She wasn't threatening anybody in any way. And the guy came around the corner and plucked her.
Yeah. And she wasn't armed.
Yeah. This situation with this lady, she was actively committing multiple crimes, one of which is a felony, is impeding law enforcement. She had been doing it for hours, and then she literally ran into a law enforcement officer who was trying to get her to stop.
Yep.
They're two completely different situations. Neither one of them should have been shot.
No, neither one of them should have been shot. But, it's a sad situation. We talked about it for an hour last week. Let's move on. So, number 3, identity fragmentation weakens collective resistance. This is where gender fluency, hyper-individualization, and constant identity sorting come in. The systemic effect is the point. If everyone is encouraged to define themselves primarily by a sub-identity, then class solidarity erodes, shared cultural norms dissolve, broad coalitions become impossible. When you focus so much on the individual, you basically ostracize yourself and everybody else from one another.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't form a combatant to the power that's growing. That power that's enslaving us, because we're all doing our own thing in our own. We're all little individual islands rather than being a cohesive group that can stand up and fight. Now, this is almost like the Antifa model, except I think they're a lot more organized than we give them credit.
Yeah. So that you're pushing people to see themselves through this lens, this identity category lens, so their attention turns inward,
right?
As opposed, and then companies roll out their diversity training, and then while they're doing that, they're cutting jobs behind the curtain. So nobody's upset about that. They're literally looking at themselves of, am I doing these things right? Because now we have company policies that determine those things.
Right.
And politics becomes about who's allowed to speak instead of who's making the rules.
Yeah.
And the result's the same every time. People fight each other instead of pushing that back against the power that is taking over them.
Yeah. They start worrying about being offended instead of worrying about who's grabbing all this power. And the people grabbing the power, they're holding all the levers here. They're holding all the buttons.
Yep, absolutely.
So then the traditional values are inconvenient. Stable families, long-term thinking, community accountability, shared moral expectations. This goes back to the combating of the individual, the sub-identity to a cultural association. Those things reduce dependence on institutions, encourage intergenerational continuity, and they create local power centers. It actually, if you think about the initial idea of the social contract, where we're still serving our own self-interest, but we come together to work together and live together to create for our own betterment, and as a result, we're bettering each other. This situation in a traditional, when we do away with traditional values, what we are doing is encouraging everybody to be their own little island and be in it totally for themselves. They're not giving anything to society. They're not helping be constructive. They're just thinking about their own needs totally, without any altruistic tendencies whatsoever. So as a result, if we're not associating with others, we're not creating our own little tribal community. To a degree, it's individual tribalism.
Well, you're taking power away from the institutions and giving them to the people's choice of being involved collectively.
Right.
through, the stable family home, through churches, through local communities, where people can get support and help, and not have to look to almighty government as the solution for everything. And that is terribly inconvenient for the people who want to enslave you.
Right. They don't outdate them. They just portray them as outdated, embarrassing, or quietly suspicious.
Yeah.
Prime example is, I brought up the Masons and the Illuminati earlier. A lot of people say, well, they're controlling everything behind the scenes. I'm a Mason. We're not controlling shit. I can reveal that secret. And it's ludicrous, but you see this with the attacks on Christianity. You see this attacks on other subgroups and cultures. It's saying be a team player, but I don't like your team.
Yeah.
That's
well, the media does a lot of the work in this regard. So they portray the two-parent households or religious communities as kind of backwards, outdated, exclusionary, even.
Well, not only do they, but they also reward and hold in high regard the opposite spectrum of that.
Yeah, the institutional intervention is like enlightened, and they're neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they attack religion, and they frame morality differently, so that the religious morality becomes the what's wrong, and their institutional morality becomes what's right in their eyes.
Yes, exactly. Dan, good point, buddy. I feel awful, man. All right. Permanent crisis keeps people pliable. Emergency mode suspends scrutiny. Health crises. We just seen one of those in 2020, didn't we? Yeah, climate crisis, democracy crisis, identity crisis, economic crisis. Some are real, some are exaggerated, some are extremely opportunistic. But the effect is consistent. People accept restrictions they normally question. Speed replaces debate. Authority presents itself as protection. Prime example, during the COVID shutdowns, everybody got them a little governmental bonus. Did anybody send that back? I didn't.
No.
And that's extremely outside the norm. There may be a $2,000 tariff rebate that comes at some point that they keep talking about, but I highly doubt will come. And that's going to have a negative impact on our economy, by the way.
Well, the whole purpose of this is to squash normal debate. Times you'd normally be questioning the decisions, but because it's being presented as a state of emergency, like time and action is of the essence, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate emergencies, whether it's the political disagreements we have, everything's a crisis and emergency. You can do the whole immigration thing is now a crisis. It's an emergency.
Yes.
So you accept the authorities' view of this and the decisions without it would be something you would normally question, but because it's a crisis, you kind of defer to their expertise, so to speak.
Yeah,
people stop debating these things.
Right. Exactly. And it's scary because we all, and you and I both are guilty of this. We comply.
Well, I thought of another analogy for this one. It's like being told that the building you work in is always on fire, and eventually you stop working your exit plan and you literally just do what the fire marshal says.
Yeah. It's like, okay, whatever. I'll do it. They wear you down.
Yeah.
And you just go along. That's a
And
good
there's,
analogy.
and there's no accountability. The urgency of the situation replaces any accountability.
You're 2-0 on your analogy, Stan.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I have more.
All right. So the end game is dependency and enslavement. Here's the part of conspiracy. Here's the part that conspiracy theories usually mess up. The goal is jackboot oppression. That's efficient. It isn't jackboot oppression. That's efficient. Inefficient.
Inefficient.
See, I told you I didn't feel good. The goal is outsourced thinking, emotional regulation by institutions, moral responsibility shifted upward to those institutions. And you touched on this in the previous slide about how we just kind of defer. We defer to the authority.
Yeah.
And we just comply and go along. Okay, well, they said this is wrong. Render unto Caesar. Somebody brought that up to me at one point when I was talking about government control and taxation. This was a few years back. And they brought up the Bible verse, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Well, if you dive deep into that verse, it's referring to the fact that, the monetary policy of the day was a Roman coin, whatever, Drexar or whatever it was. And you had to pay your taxes or die, but that didn't mean you have to comply with everything and agree with it. And that, we're going to do an entire episode because I've also done the research and I have ideas on how we can fight this, but it's not something we can put in one episode. So we're this week we're posing the issue. We're trying to open your eyes to something. Population that asks permission instead of asserting rights doesn't need to be forced. Think about this. When's the last time you went fishing without going and getting a fishing license? Yes, in Florida, we can stand on the shore and fish without a license if we're a Florida resident. But there again, we have to be a Florida resident to do that. When's the last time you drove a car without having a driver's license? I may or may have not done that about 3 years of my life in my early 20s. But it wasn't because I had lost my license. It just expired and I didn't renew it. I never got down to renew it. You think about this. We ask the government for permission to do things without even thinking about why we're having to ask them for that permission. We've conceded our right to free movement in our own vehicle to the government because they say we had to have a license to do it. And that's a really simple analogy. And I'm not saying I'm necessarily opposed to driver's licenses. You should be able to prove you can operate a piece of machinery that large that goes that speed in a way that's safe, because then you're infringing on somebody else's right to life. But still, think about it. We ask permission from government to operate businesses. We ask permission to, if I want to cut somebody's hair and earn money for it, I have to go to a school and get a license to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. We have trained, not we, the powers that be have trained people to defer to the experts, to even to algorithms, and then institutions to tell you what's acceptable.
Yes.
And what that does is it causes people to inherently stop trusting their own judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're not thinking for yourself. You're waiting for approval, and before even, in a lot of cases, having an opinion about something.
Sure.
You're waiting for that narrative to tell you what to think about something, because we no longer use our own judgment and our gut to tell us what's right from wrong.
No, we defer to authority.
Yep.
That's what we have to do.
It's sad.
It is very sad. So why it feels so unsettling? because none of this requires everyone to be in on it. There doesn't need to be a Dr. Evil sitting there doing this to run this. It's systemic. The system evolve incentives. They become inborn and self-breeding and self-aware.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a bunch of people collectively to create this conspiracy. It feeds off itself, and it ends up replicating in certain ways because it doesn't. They don't define the next crisis. Sometimes they do, but in most cases, it just occurs naturally based on the society they put in place. So the people are reacting differently, etc. So the next thing happens, and that creates the next crisis or the next reaction, and then the actual core group of people that's involved in it end up manipulating it, and all of these 7 different things all play out in each category. And as we become less independent and more dependent on the systems, and then in that last slide where you said, we're waiting for somebody to tell us what's right and wrong, these things just tend to continue without having to have, because people always say, how is it possible to have that many people lined up making these things happen? Well, you have a whole entire third of the country lined up making them happen on their own because you created an environment that incentivizes that decentivizes them thinking about it. Like you're perpetuating the actions based on all these things. It's really ingenious and frightening.
It is absolutely frightening. Now, to say that there wasn't at one time some evil doctor or evil guy or some evil council sitting there and saying, all right, this is how we're going to gain power, I don't know. I can't speak to that. There are people that says there's this hidden cabal that's controlling everything, and that may very well be the case. But the systems they've put in place.
But they're not controlling a lady running her car into an ICE agent.
No, absolutely not. They've created self-perpetuating systems that continue like a cancer.
Yes.
It replicates and it grows on its own. They've created the small monster. It's like dropping the drop of poison in the water, it replicating itself. Media chases clicks. I mean, you think about it right here on the Emerald Coast, we have a newspaper over in Fort Walton Beach. And every 2 out of 3 articles they post are some inflammatory liberal spin rhetoric. And they do that because they know this is a predominantly conservative area and they're going to get all this engagement because they're not selling papers. Who's buying a fucking paper anymore? So what they do is they get this engagement. So they monetize their Facebook page. That's one way that they generate money. People go and want to read the article and it's behind a paywall, then they got to pay $1 to read it. And, several people will pay that $1 to do that.
Yeah. Somebody will say, did you see the crap they wrote? And then everybody wants to go read it. And then everybody wants to fight the battle online. And it literally becomes a money-making machine for them.
Absolutely. And bureaucracies expand beyond scope. ATF's a prime example, how they started instituting their own gun rules and enforcement laws without approval from Congress, without a blessing from anywhere above them. Mm-hmm. They started expanding their own powers. That's a great example and a recent example.
Well, you can make that example for most of the alphabet institutions.
Mm-hmm.
The EPA's done the same thing, where they tell you can't have a lake on your land.
Yeah, or under the Commerce Clause, the federal government can make you have a fence around your pool because that water receives rainwater from time to time, and that traverses state lines. That's interstate regulation. There's been more governmental expansion under the Commerce Clause than anything else. But anyway, corporations. Go ahead.
I've got an analogy for this one too.
All right, let's get through it, and then you can drop it on us. Corporations avoid risk. Politicians avoid blame. We've talked about it 100 times at least, where you got a guy who's preaching the gospel when he's running and he gets to Congress and he he introduces the bill that he said he was going up. I'm going to Washington to impact change. And he gets up there and he introduces this bill that's going to do away with Obamacare, lower taxes, make us all rich, or whatever he promised, whatever pie in the sky dream he promised before he got elected. Mm-hmm. And he gets up there and he comes home and he says, well, I tried, but the other 400 some odd members in the House voted me down. So they can avoid blame. They can diffuse blame. Intentional or not, the trajectory converges. That's the creepiest part. No villain monologue required. The villain is the system itself. What's your analogy, buddy?
So it's like a river that is formed. No one tells the water where to go, but gravity, terrain guarantees it all flows in the same direction.
Yeah. That's a good one, man. If nothing ever gets rolled back, that's not progress.
No.
And you're not oppressed, ladies and gentlemen. You're managed.
Yep.
So
no secret meeting. Everybody follows the incentives.
Yeah. We're about to close this out in a minute because I feel awful and I want to lay down. But if the system truly works for you, why does it panic every time people think independently and question it?
Because it doesn't work for you.
Exactly.
Never has. Never will.
And you know what? And we're not just talking about governmental institutions here. We're talking about our own party, the Republican Party, the Democrat Party. Elon Musk got ostracized because he started questioning some of their stuff. You start questioning some of the things locally on some of this stuff, and you get pushed out as that's outdated principles. We can't live in the 1700s again, even though, the libertarian principles sound great. Well, why not? When you start thinking independently, it makes people uncomfortable because it's kind of funny. We were talking about how we are all our own subset or this sub-identity thing's part of this whole managed drift doctrine. But we make dissenting or outside opinions that make question anything within the growing structure of the bureaucracy. We ostracize it, we criticize it, we lambaste it, and we call witchcraft, and we hold verbal trials.
I don't know. I keep trying to think of how we can come up with things for the podcast that aren't so negative and bleak. And
I think what we do now that we've brought this up, when we speak next week, I've got some ideas for solutions. That's where the positivity comes in. And the thing is in order to fix something, we've got to recognize the problem. We can't ignore it. We can't run from it. We can't wish it away. We have to address it. And I've always, even when I was in the corporate world and I managed people, I always said, I don't want to hear the labor pains. I want to see the baby. I don't want to hear the problem without a proposed solution. And I know we're not delivering on the solution tonight, but I think I have some ideas that can help, or we have some ideas that can help. But we can't just ignore it, even though we try to be positive, try to make jokes about he-cocks. We've got to be able to recognize the problem, admit that it is, before we can come up with a solution.
Yeah, and the reality of it is and some of what we do is try to educate, shine a spotlight, give a common man's view of the things that are happening in politics in the everyday world to try to help people, because you and I aren't going to sit here and fix the world.
No,
we don't
Absolutely
have
not.
we don't have the solutions for it. We have some ideas, but it's going to take a whole lot more effort. And when I say effort, I mean just think about what we just highlighted. It is literally a tsunami of things that are working against
Well,
fixing these things.
and what we also highlighted was a codified, clear view of I view it as a clearing up of, all right. I hear people say, "What is going on in this world? The world's on fire. We're like a huge dumpster fire, and everything's this and that, and you can't pay attention because this week a girl's getting shot that's trying to run over an ICE agent, and this week we're snatched up a Venezuelan leader, or this week this going on, this week this is going on, and it is we're constantly pulled and pulled and pulled. And if we understand why all of that's going on, which I think we kind of explained tonight, and how, now we can think about it from a higher level in plain speak. And I know we got a little bit into theory and some deep thoughts tonight, but I still feel like it's pretty plainly stated.
Sure.
If we can think about it along those lines, that helps us keep a clearer head for clear solutions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's gonna take, and there's a segment of our population that are like, I don't have any issues. I don't see any of this stuff. Well, that's because you're oblivious and you're not paying attention, which may be a better psychological world for you to exist in, but it doesn't help fix any problems. And you can make an argument it is
contributing to it.
Very much contributing to it, if not the biggest contributor to it.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling great about the world and you think, I walk outside and I don't see any of these issues. Well, they're there. We're not making them up.
Well, and that goes back into this drift theory. I mean, this drift doctrine. If they're not seeing it, that is what the bureaucracy and the I don't know what we call it. I mean, you can't call it a great Satan because you can't point to any individual.
The
systems, that's what it wants. And I'm not saying it's sentient and it's already developed its own consciousness, but to some degree, it's a bunch of separate consciousnesses that are actually working towards the same goal of increasing power without dissent.
And it doesn't matter who's like that person or people that are trying to get that power are interchangeable.
Right.
It's not, XYZ that is controlling this, and they're the person that's going to be the beauty and the scary part about this is it's not definable. So it's almost like it's a status that ends up being the beneficiary of the power structure as opposed to an individual or a group of individuals.
Well, just talk about really cool analogies. Think about the wasp nest or yellow jacket nest best because they're in the ground. You don't see them. But if you run over one, they start coming out one at one, and you can kill them one at a time. They keep going. They keep coming until the entire hive's out there eating on your ass. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way this is it doesn't matter who the head of the FBI is or who the head of the ATF is or whatever. All of the bees are still in the hive and they're still perpetuating this and they're still perpetuating their own existence. They're justifying their own existence. They're justifying their power.
And if you threaten that power, they'll come out of the hive and bite your ass.
Along those lines, I am not suicidal. I love my life after this episode. Let me be plain and clear that's what it is. And if I should disappear, tell my family I love them and that I didn't go willingly. How about that?
Factual.
Right. So you got anything else, Dan?
Monday.
Monday, Miami. That's right.
It's funny. I watched, I obviously follow, the Miami Hurricanes forums and stuff on
No,
Facebook.
you don't, do you?
And there's been a meme, and it's literally the same exact verbiage for each one where I think it's called the SEC numbers guy.
Yeah.
Basically, and I'm summarizing, basically says, experts are talking and they think that the Miami Indiana game could be the biggest blowout in the history of the NCAA playoffs. Well, the same exact meme came out last week with Miami versus Ole Miss. Verbiage, everything the same. They just changed Ole Miss, and then before that it was Ohio State, and before that it was Texas A&M. So there's somebody in the SEC who's pissed off that there's no SEC team in there, so they are going to disparage the competition because there's no SEC team.
What? But they're disparaging in favor of Indiana.
No,
Okay.
of anybody who's playing Miami.
Oh, okay.
And they may do the same thing with other games. I don't see them because I don't follow.
You're not in those forums.
Yeah, I'm not following James Madison, although that very much was lined up to be that. But
right.
Like when who did Alabama beat? Oklahoma. Right. So they very easily could have put that in the Alabama forums, and they could have put it in the Oklahoma forums, and had the same thing. But they wouldn't do that because they're SEC teams. So they would do it in non-SEC games.
Well, here's the thing, Dan. You're my friend. I'm rooting for you. I just think, and I mentioned this to you, like the game last week, it was like it was a little, there was some magic in there. You know what I'm saying? Like a little playoff magic going on. It reminded me of Auburn in 2010, where you had both the pick six and the 1 minute, 1 second play and all of that. And it just kind of worked out, and Auburn ended up going to national championship and winning. You've got some pixie dust on you, brother. You got some little magic dust going on.
Well,
but I think the Cinderella story is Indiana. And I'm telling you what, that dude never smiles. That coach never smiles.
How is it a Cinderella story when the average age of your team is 23? You're like almost as old as the Packers. And you basically, it's not like Indiana has built a program over the years of getting better and better and better and better, all becoming a nationally prominent school. No, they literally bought all their players in the porthole.
You can't be mad at them.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. You're playing you can make that argument for everybody. Miami rents a quarterback every year too, but they also have true freshmen that are playing, that are contributing. So Indiana is not some Cinderella story. It just happens to be a name we haven't seen before.
Well, that's the Cinderella part of it.
No, it's not.
These corn, these corn. I started calling them corn huskers. I mean, but that's basically what's in Indiana is corn.
Well, I remember Miami's first national championship because Nebraska was unbeatable. They had the greatest college football team ever, and they came into the Orange Bowl at that time, and Miami beat them.
Like I said, I'm rooting for you because you're my friend.
Miami couldn't be beat the year that they went to the Fiesta Bowl and got off the plane in fatigues, and Penn State, a subpar team, beat them. I mean, these things happen where the national media is like, you got no chance, and they end up winning. Like Miami had no chance to beat Ohio State, and they beat the crap out of Ohio State.
Man, Ohio State's overrated shit. Anyway.
Okay. Well, how overrated are they when it was 13-10 against Indiana? How good is Indiana then?
I don't know. We'll see.
We will see.
Don't get cocky. Don't get cocky, Dan. Don't get cocky.
I am not like, holy shit, we have no chance. That is crazy to me.
I didn't say you didn't have a chance.
No, but there's a lot of people out there that are.
Well,
69% of the money is on Indiana.
Well,
The public money. I guarantee you Vegas is going like this.
oh yeah. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah.
But all right, side note, have you seen that? Somebody made a video of Cignetti clocking the cameras from the sidelines.
All right. That whole conspiracy stuff that, they hacked in and they got the scripts from the team, and that's how they knew that Oregon was going to throw that out, and that's why they got the pick six. That's nonsense. That stuff is all
That's
ridiculous.
If you can. There's a way to figure out the plays, but it's almost impossible these days. But you're not going to be able to hack the system and get them.
Who knows? It's crazy. Well, listen, the world of sports keeps us.
They probably built them an AI model up there at Indiana, and they've got it figured out. They got an AI model doing the predictions for them.
Well, what's funny is the defensive coordinator for Miami was Cignetti's defensive coordinator at JMU.
Oh.
So there's two sides of that coin. He knows his offensive tendencies, and there's also he knows his defensive tendencies. But I guarantee you Miami's got a lot more talent than they had at JMU on the defensive side of the ball.
I'm sure. The defense looked strong the other night. They came out real strong. There was a lot of great defensive plays.
Well, if
your boy Carson, isn't that the quarterback's name, Carson?
Carson Beck, yeah.
He couldn't get anybody catch anything in the first half.
Well, when they needed him, he delivered that whole drive. I was the whole time, that 3 minutes when they were down, I'm like, just run it down their throat. You got all 3 timeouts and you got 3 minutes. Run it, run it, run it. They couldn't stop the run all night. And they threw on almost every down.
Yeah.
And they made some third downs where they needed it. And, it's like everybody would say if they need Carson Beck to win the game for them, they got no chance. Well, they just saw Carson Beck throw the ball 90% of the time on the final drive and win the game.
Yeah. So if you never knew this, we had a very short-lived sports podcast. So we've kind of gone off the political rails right now and doing a little.
Oh, wait, I got it right here, Wes.
Well, that's what I'm wearing is my BSN hat right now.
There you go. Now I'm wearing. I didn't notice your hat.
Yeah, I've got mine on. So yeah, we had a short-lived sports podcast, and then we got so engaged. It was during one of the election seasons, and we kind of just dropped the ball on that. So it was called Back Porch Sports Network. But all right, guys, thank y'all for tuning in tonight. Be sure to share this with your friends and family. If you didn't get to watch all of it, go back and watch it. We think this is pretty important. And it's not even ideologically skewed, except for us interjecting our own personal political opinions. This is happening to all of us, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. And you have to question whether you want it to happen or not. I guess
let's
that's
be
the ideological divide.
Let's be clear. There's only one logical side of the aisle to be on right now, because look at how many people who would be considered left to center that are now called far right extremists.
Oh yeah, like Tim Smith. We were talking about that off the air. He's a libertarian, and they're calling him a far right extremist now.
Tim Pool, yeah.
Tim Pool. I'm sorry. What did I say? Tim Smith.
Yeah, Dave Smith is the
Dave. Yeah. And I know about 37 Tim Smiths. That's probably why I said that. And I am on the cold meds. So, with that being said, guys, thank you for all of the folks that tuned in a little late. Be sure to watch the cast and chime in. And we watch the comments. Even when we're not live, we check them out. Good luck to Dan in Miami.
Watch Monday
I would
night.
rather a Southern team win, even though I spent a lot of summers in Indiana growing up. And we love you guys, and we'll see you next time on the Driveway Liberty Podcast.